Away we go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Welcome one and all to Coffee Talk. It is time once again for Coffee Talk Live, where we will be having some discussion about what is going on in the world today, taking a look at some clips from the news and sharing some dialogue with those of you who are able to join us for the live portion. And of course, if you are watching or listening somewhere else and you would like to join the live portion, you can find us Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Coffee Talk Live and Prepper University, at Coffee Talk Live and at Prepper University on YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Coffee Talk Chat, and you can find me on fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon. Hopefully we will not see any interruptions today. Last week on Friday, on the Friday's podcast, I was cut off at the 37-minute mark. Cut clean off. Not sure if it was Restream or YouTube that crashed, but I was unable to get back into the stream. I was stuck. So hopefully we will not see any further interruptions. Naturally, I do read through as many of the comments as I can. So I'll go ahead and say hello to some of the people that have joined us thus far. I see Donna Beaver is here, reminding people thumbs up, like, and share. Please do if you don't mind. Helter is here. Brian, Semperfi New York. Dragon, Cyberjack Senior. Spectre is here. Sven is here, says they're in Michigan. H12, Camilla, and Michael W. says, awesome show, been following for years. Thank you. Glad you're getting something out of it. Joined today by two felines. There's Granny Smith over there in the corner. And then there is Dusty sitting on top of my records. Thanks, Dusty. Keeping me company for the time being as we get ready to dive into what is going on in the world today. What is going on in the world today? Too much of one thing and not enough of the other. Here's the big news of the day. Big news of the day, and this is a Fox News article, and that is, of course, the DNC is jumping off, and they're afraid that they're going to see a repeat of 1968. And Michael says they're in Cape Cod, maker of Cape Cod potato chips. Kettle chips. I like Cape Cod potato chips, actually. They're pretty good. And Monkey has joined us. Monkey has joined us today. But they're worried that it's going to end up looking like the DNC in 1968. And it's not the same. That's, of course, where you get the whole world is watching from, as people chanted it for 3 days. Tens of thousands of people who were relentlessly beaten by riot police and National Guard troops. And they were chanting the whole world is watching because there were film crews from all over the globe. And they were protesting the Vietnam War. And it made no difference because we sure did go on with the draft, didn't we? Inspector says Ukraine took down the pipeline. It's official. I haven't read anything about it yet. I'm sure they'd like to take credit for it. Whether or not they did it remains to be seen. But if I see an article for it, I'll grab it. As we get into this, Fox News. Protests erupt and businesses board up outside the DNC in Chicago. So much for making money from the DNC if you have to board up your store and abandon it because you're afraid of riots. Anti-Israel protesters are swarming outside the Democratic National Convention in Chicago as police gear up for a week of unrest in the city. The 4-day convention kicks off Monday at the United Center near the West Side, where as many as 100,000 anti-Israel demonstrators are expected to protest throughout the week. It remains to be seen whether or not that many people actually show up. A lot of people could just show up to be agitators, and they don't care about what's going on in the Middle East at all, because people will do that. At least 7 large demonstrations took place on the evening of the convention on issues from abortion to voicing their objections to U.S. support for Israel, the Chicago Tribune reported. The city prepared for discord by fencing off the convention center and recruiting a heavy police presence on the scene. And have you seen the DNC thus far? You saw the giant inflatable. They had a huge balloon shaped like a IUD, for birth control, and they had people on parade dressed as like birth control pills. I mean, is anybody really trying to stop people from using birth control? The argument primarily is about abortion. That's what everybody's fighting about. And that's not even our biggest problem. But that's what they've got us all fighting about. Where are we? It says Governor Pritzker says that 150 Illinois National Guard members are currently on standby for the convention. That's not a lot. That's not a lot. This is what your average business looks like right now. ChicagoBoardUpServices.com is making a mint because all the stores are afraid that there's going to be riots. Let me catch up a couple of comments. Jane has joined us. Inspector says Germany pulled all aid, including military. I have a story on that, Spectre. I was going to talk about that. And Puck says Planned Parenthood will have mobile abortion clinics on site at the DNC convention. I heard that, but I did not see a direct article on the subject. I heard that. And I mean, if this is what the DNC is all about, do you really want to be part of it? I heard that they were doing vasectomies too. We're all about your reproductive rights, which it's an oxymoron to call abortion reproductive rights. It's more like termination rights, if we're being honest. They always use reverse descriptions for that sort of thing. And again, this is your platform. We'll take away everything else. We'll take away all of your rights, but we'll let you decide to terminate a pregnancy. And then, oh, look, you have freedom. Something's really wrong with that description. Fluke Man has joined us. And Semper says, funny how the DNC has the National Guard, a wall, and ID required to get in. Apparently, the National Guard isn't needed for riots. No wall for the southern border and no ID for voting. No. You are right. And Brian says they use abortion as birth control. That's a problem. Yeah, and I've often described it as being like a form of retroactive abortion. I was not responsible enough at the time, so I'll terminate it now, is the attitude. And there's the Staples downtown boarded up, just in case anybody wants to steal office supplies. They'll have a hard time getting into Staples. And here's the cycle cops, 300 cycle police officers. These guys you got to watch out for because they're usually the only police on the force that are in good physical condition. Seriously. There you go. It says Joe Biden is scheduled to speak Monday evening to deliver an opening night address to pass the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris. Big deal. Big deal. And Chillin' Dave has joined us. And then Puck confirms, yes, vasectomies too. I saw a picture of the vehicle. That's insane. That's embarrassing. That's embarrassing that that's what people are more concerned about. And again, when you're dealing with every lawmaker, any lawmaker, what is the job? The very first thing that you should be concerned about with any lawmaker is whether or not they are being good stewards of the tax money that is taken from you by force. That's the most important thing. That's square one. Are you being good stewards, or are you misusing and misappropriating the money that is being extorted from me as a taxpayer? All the rest of this is all in your feelings. All the racial equality stuff, all the abortion stuff, that's them getting into your feelings to screw you up. And it works. It works. Chillin says murder over responsibility. Indeed. Anybody can use birth control. If there's no birth control, hell, there's other alternatives. Use your imagination. You're the one, you were there too. You can't just blame dude. You were there too. And now, because you think it's going to be inconvenient, well, I'll just use retroactive birth control by way of Planned Parenthood. Brian says, what's even more disgusting is how abortion is done. Yeah, I won't read the rest of that. I've listened to the guy. I can't remember who it is. There's a guy who was before Congress that used to do those procedures and got away from it now is an advocate against the procedures, discussing how it's actually done, and it's really hard to listen to. Flukeman says they accuse anyone supporting gun rights of being murderers. Indeed. Indeed. And Jane says, talking to Brian. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'll leave the side conversations alone. And speaking of being a good steward, and we see a conversation like this, we see a story like this almost every week. Almost every week, I read a story like this. Okay? So here it comes before we get back to the other stuff. Washington Examiner. This was revealed this morning, but only just within the last hour, I think, they've exposed what this person was arrested for. So Washington Examiner, D.C. Councilman Trayon White Sr. arrested on bribery charges. So on Sunday evening, so this just happened, FBI agents arrested District of Columbia Councilman Trayon White Sr., or Trayon, excuse me, outside of a luxury high-rise building in Navy Yard. White, who is the chairman of the council's Committee on Recreation, Libraries, and Youth Affairs, which oversees several agencies, including the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services, was arrested on bribery charges. The complaint alleges in June 2024, White agreed to accept $156,000 in cash payments in exchange for pressuring the Office of Neighborhood Safety and Engagement and the DYRS to extend several DC contracts valued at $5.2 million. The contracts were for two companies to provide violence intervention services, which all sounds like bullshit anyways, but let's go on. White was supposed to use his position as the chairman of the committee to ensure the contracts would be renewed. The $156,000 that he accepted was valued at 3% of the contract's value. He received 4 separate cash payments of $35,000 this year on 4 separate occasions. The investigation is being handled by the U.S. Attorney's Office for the District of Columbia, the FBI Washington Field Office, the D.C. Office of the Inspector General, and the IRS Criminal Investigation Washington Field Office. Because the investigation into the alleged bribery scheme involved contracts that could soon be awarded and other potential official acts that could be taken, our office took swift steps to address the alleged crimes we were investigating, and that is a quote from U.S. Attorney Matthew Graves. Okay, this is a 2-term councilman that represents Ward 8 in the southeast Washington, where a quarter of the residents live below the poverty line. And as you can well imagine, Trayon White Sr. is black and a Democrat. And it's literally like every week I'm reading about some lawmaker, a district attorney, a mayor, a representative, a councilman, somebody, a senator, who is in some kind of trouble for handing out bribes, taking bribes, misappropriating funds, blackmail, committing some kind of crime. Every week we read a story like this of corruption, and 95% of the time it's a Democrat lawmaker. You notice that? And it's not that there is no such thing as corruption in the Republican Party. My best guess would be that for some reason, and insert your own speculation there, the Democrat Party, and because it's not democratic, that's a mistake also. And people often say that because they're used to hearing it. It's the Democrat Party, not the Democratic Party. And they are not democratic. They're actually more socialist than anything. The Democrat Party seems to attract people who are a lot more selfish and therefore prone to ripping off their constituents, quite frankly. And Puck confirms also giant inflatable IUD is in the front of the convention building. I saw that. And Semper says it sounds like another day of regular business with DC politics. No kidding. And Helta says, while this is happening, the FBI is doing next to nothing to arrest Tiffany Henyard. She is still in Dalton doing whatever the heck she wants. Correct. And we read a story about her just last week because what's her name? Leprechaun there read, I guess, finished their investigation. $400 an hour for 3 months. Thank you. Finished her investigation and came up with all sorts of crazy things. I mean, that she had spent what, $35,000 or $36,000 in one day on Amazon. They went from being $5.5 million in the black to almost $4 million in the red. Where's their money? Where's that damn near $10 million gone? And they can't demonstrate it. And Raccoon has joined us, and so has the warden. Glad you could make it today. Dragon says, I bet they arrested him for his ridiculous hair. That's why the FBI wants him. And Zane has joined us. What's wrong with his hair? There's not a picture of him on here. I don't think there's a picture of Trayon here, unless it's in the footage. Let me look in the footage real quick and see if there's a picture of him. Just reporters talking about him. I'm looking to see if there's a picture of the councilman. And he's the councilman in a very poor section of town, taking bribes. No, there's no picture of him there. No picture of him. Taking bribes. Big surprise. But then why does this keep happening? Why Democrats, and so many of them are people of color, unfortunately, and they take advantage of people within their own communities. And this is something that's interesting in a Daily Caller article. It sort of ties in with that concept. Daily Caller, and I've talked about this a lot, quote, we've had black people disappoint us. Chicago voters tell Fox they feel pressure to vote for Kamala Harris. See, and there's the picture there. And this is Corey Brooks, a senior pastor of New Beginnings Church of Chicago. And I've heard this. And by the way, my wife and I, and I talked about it, of course, her mother is back in the hospital again. She's ill again. They finally gave her MRI and a spinal tap too now. But, she's doing better. So hopefully she'll be back in the nursing home soon. We made a visit down to her father over this weekend, okay, to check on her father because he's not doing too great either. And we passed through Yamasee in South Carolina. As you get further and further down in there, it's very large population black communities. You pass through counties where the population is like 99% black at least. I did not see one Harris sign. I did see, and I should have taken some pictures, every presidential voting sign that I saw, they were all for Trump. Every one I saw was a Trump sign in those areas down there, which I thought was interesting. But back to the article, it says Chicago voters told Fox and Friends co-host Lawrence Jones ahead of the Democratic National Convention Monday they feel pressure to vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. Harris has yet to formally address the media by doing a sit-down interview or a press conference in the 29 days since she has become the presumptive 2024 Democratic presidential nominee. Biden ended his re-election bid and endorsed the vice president. We know this. While some voters indicated they would support Harris, several others told Fox News they are not sure who they will vote for. At this point, I don't know. Okay. One man told Jones he will be voting for Harris because it would be historical to have the first black female president. When asked about this, one woman said, there is definitely a lot more pressure to vote for Harris because I'm of her race and gender. Quote, I want to hear more about what she's going to do because being black is one thing. We've had black people to disappoint us. One black woman told Jones, being a woman is one thing, but we've had women disappoint us. And this is kind of the point, and this is something I've talked about several times. That a lot of people within those communities, there is a lot of pressure within those communities to A, vote Democrat, and B, vote the black ticket every time. And these communities are run down and crushed by black leadership who takes advantage of them, scams them. Always go to a black business, always get served. Yeah, call the black HVAC guy, call the black plumber, call the black electrician. Vote for the black councilman because of their color, not because of the quality of their work or because of the quality of their ethics or moral values. And they often end up getting screwed over by these people, but still do it because there is pressure from within those communities to do so. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate because they end up with leadership who are there to take advantage of them. And they must be able to see through this, and they still vote that ticket. Like this person, first person they spoke to said, quote, it would be historical to have the first black female president. I'm tired of bullshit history like that. Like we read about Omar last week. She's on the history books for being the first female in Congress to wear a headscarf to the meetings. So the hell what? That's history now? What happened to when we used to have real history, real historic events that meant something? I guess we just don't anymore. Have all the worlds been conquered? And Alexander wept over the breadth of his domain, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Is that the idea? Monkey says, I actually saw a Harris sign, and good God, it was bland as hell. Brian says Trump did more for blacks than Obama and Harris ever did, and I can see that. And then here comes All People. He says the majority of inner city blacks and black politicians in the U.S. hail from post-1965 migrant households. And I'll leave that up there for a moment if anybody wants to read it. I do try to, if I read a comment, I try to throw it up on the screen for people so they can see it, because I know that sometimes there's a conflict between the two channels where you may not be able to see one or the other. And I can tell you there is definitely pressure within these communities to vote a color ticket rather than a merit ticket. I don't have a problem. Again, you want to roll out someone who's black and or female to take a certain political office, to be a lawmaker in a certain area, I don't care. But please let them have some honesty, some integrity, and let them do the damn job the way it's supposed to be done. I'm tired of these phonies that they roll out, that all they do is just operate as hucksters and take advantage of everyone. Dragon says the city voted in people like Lori Lightfoot and Brandon Johnson. The city has been on fire. Yeah, and Lori Lightfoot did a terrible job, and Brandon Johnson has done even worse. And then you've got Henyard, who was just mentioned earlier. And who do they hire to investigate Henyard? Lori Lightfoot. Why is this woman even employable at this point? Back to Monkey, he says, but the rest I've seen have more Trump signs, though not a whole lot since I'm in urban Cleveland, but not in Cleveland. You're in like a suburb of Cleveland, I guess. And here's what was brought up earlier about Germany. About Germany being the reason I thought this article, I wasn't sure about the pipeline confirmation, although I doubt Ukraine's ability to pull that off, at least not without assistance, which would lead us to the United States. The United States could definitely pull it off. England could pull it off. China could pull off blowing up the pipeline because of how deep it was. It takes a lot more skill than I wonder if Ukraine was capable of on their own. But anyways, also they would have taken credit for it right away, I think. But IntelliNews article, Germany cancels future funds for the Ukraine war effort. All right. First, it was the Americans that ran out of money for Ukraine, leading to a disastrous 6-month hiatus in supplies that allowed Russia to destroy 90% of Ukraine's non-nuclear electricity generation capacity. Now it's the Germans' turn. Berlin has frozen all additional military aid to the Ukraine due to budget constraints. The Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung reported on August 18th. If I pronounced any of that right, I don't speak German. The decision, backed by Chancellor Olaf Scholz, was ordered by Finance Minister Christian Lindner and limits new funding for Ukraine's military needs to aid packages that have already been announced. No additional funds will be allocated for the coming years, despite ongoing military conflicts in the Ukraine. Bankova, Ukraine's equivalent to the Kremlin, quickly posted a message on social media saying the financial aid to Ukraine by Germany would not be suspended. So Ukraine is lying about it not being suspended then. I think it's interesting, though, this article gives you a window into a little bit of the truth about how it looks in the interior of the Ukraine with their opening statements here, keeping in mind that IntelliNews is, I believe, a German news service. Is that correct? It says because of the money that was cut off from the United States, they've had a disastrous 6-month hiatus. So in the last 6 months, that has allowed Russia to destroy 90% of Ukraine's non-nuclear electricity generating capacity. So aside from nuclear power, they're only pulling 10% of the grid from everywhere else. That's disastrous. That is disastrous, and that gives you an idea of just how screwed up Ukraine's infrastructure is right now. With no power, they can't really do anything else. But all we get in the West are fluff stories about how the Ukraine has made another bold step against Russia. Have they? I can't tell reading that. If they're relying almost exclusively on what's left of nuclear power to run their country's infrastructure, then they're done. I mean, they're really just buried. Let me catch up a couple of comments. Spectre says they had help and we all know who from. I can only speculate. I have to put it like that. Puck says the U.S. and Norway blew up the pipeline. These Ukrainians did it. Stories are propaganda. And Nature Nerd says Ukraine invaded Kursk and have taken over 1,000 square kilometers of land, but I've heard Russia are already taking towns back. 1,000 square kilometers of like patches of dirt or like vacant lots of trees. What does Kursk look like? That's the question, because Russia's good for that. Russia is good for retreating barren wastelands and letting troops wear themselves out and then going in later and sweeping it. They did it to Napoleon and they did it to Germany in World War II, where they just, let's just keep retreating. If we come across anything useful, we'll just burn it. That's an old tactic for Russia. Now let's see. It says some commenters have pointed out the final decision lies with Bernstadt, the Parliament, which has not yet made a decision and already approved additional funds last year, contrary to the government's draft budget. So a workaround may be still found. Yeah, I'm sure that someone in the German government will run interference on this, because that's just the way that it goes. But if nobody was funding this backdoor style from Europe and from the United States, that war would have been over in 2 months. Russia would have done whatever they went in there to do, because they've done stuff like this before, gone in, smashed up a country in a week or two and left. They've done it before. You pissed Russia off, they go in there, they bust up a couple of your power stations, they knock out some water treatment plants or whatever just to screw up your infrastructure, and they go home. But this has been dragging on as long as it has because money's getting dumped into the Ukraine from all over the place. If the money cuts off, it'll be all over with. Dragon says U.S. media outlets would have a field day. Imagine the outcry if the U.S. government decided to drop funding in the Ukraine and lower the deficit. And Urban Angst has made it. He says, listening in today. Glad you could join us, Urban Angst. But there you go. I mean, I could go on and on. It's really just talking about all the same stuff. There's nothing in this article, skimming ahead, nothing in here about a pipeline. But what are you going to do? What are you going to do, ladies and gentlemen? And Puck says Ukrainians are suffering terrible losses in the cursed adventure. Meanwhile, Russians are advancing elsewhere on the front. And I'll throw that up for all people. You can read that if you would like. You can read that if you would like. As we shift gears here, something that I was talking about. On Friday before I was kicked out. So I'll go ahead and pick this back up. And this is about the US's own grid. And I've done a video specifically on this subject. And I'm going to show some images. And these images are courtesy of the United States Department of Energy. That's where I got these pictures and these graphs from. And you see a map there, okay? This is a map, these maps, and I showed this on that video. This map is all of the natural gas-powered electric plants in the United States, highlighted in orange, little orange dots. And I was making a point about solar and wind power, which I was doing last Thursday, I believe. And so I brought the maps out again Friday. Again, Department of Energy maps. So the government is giving you the information, U.S. government's information. The information is out there, folks. If anybody wants to bother to look for it, nobody does. And it was about the fact that the solar power and wind power is a scam. That's my argument. And I'm using the government's website to do it. Okay. Natural gas powered electric plants, 1,793 natural gas powered plants in the US, and they represent 34% of the grid. 34% of the grid coming from roughly almost 1,800 gas powered plants. Okay. That's very important to understand. Second, coal. 400, and gray spots on this map, 400 coal-powered electric plants in the United States generating 30% of the grid, okay? So that's between gas and coal, 64% of the grid being shown here. Coal is the second most efficient behind nuclear power, which I'm going to show you here in a moment. I'm going to try to, because these maps are out of order, unfortunately. Nuclear power, 61 nuclear plants highlighted in lavender there, generating 20% of the grid. So that's the first most efficient. I know people talk about clean nuclear power. There's really no such thing. It all produces waste, and that waste is not used really to generate power in other plants, as has been rumored. I've found no evidence of that. I haven't found an article on it that makes any sense. They bury it in Nevada. So long-term waste, which I think is a problem, but okay, it's still the most efficient. 20% of the grid from 61 plants makes nuclear power number one most efficient, because we're at 84% now, if you're following. Coal is second most efficient, 400 plants making 30%. And gas, third most efficient, roughly 1,800 plants making 64%, right? Then we get to hydroelectric, 1,444 plants producing 7%. Blue dots, hydroelectric, that's not very efficient. Hydroelectric, that's a lot of plants making 7% of the grid, okay? So now we're at 91%. So where's all this wind power? Where's all of our damn wind power and solar power? Well, let's see. Wind power, 999 wind-powered electric plants. So roughly 1,000, generating 6% of the grid. I'm sorry, 400 coal plants produce 30%, and you're shutting them down for wind and solar, and you've got 1,000 plants that only produce 6%. And windmills are very expensive to maintain and operate. Very expensive. That is terribly inefficient. And even worse, solar power. Now remember, I want to make the comparison. I'm going to cascade this. 1,793 gas plants generate 34% of the grid. The majority of our grid comes from gas, okay? Natural gas. 1,721 solar-powered plants, 1% of the grid. 1%. So the equivalent number of gas plants produces 34 times the amount of electricity as solar. Solar is completely useless. I mean, it's good for balancing out. Like, let's say you have solar panels on your roof and it helps to supplement income. It helps to supplement power for your home. But as far as on the grid, it's worthless. It's worthless. It's being forced on us. It's an inefficient system that is not proven to work, forced on us, just like electric vehicles, just like wind power, just like a lot of technology that's being crammed down our throat, that it's not ready. It doesn't work as efficiently as other methods. It's not ready. It isn't. Nature Nerd said History Legions is a good source on the Ukraine war. Ukraine is losing several kilometers a week on the front lines, and the casualty rate is steep. Flukeman says there's an article that says Beijing admits Hong Kong flap ship destroyed Baltic gas line. Interesting. Zane says, I don't think solar and wind are a scam. I think they're overpromised. Well, they're a scam if they are overpromised, and billions, hundreds of billions in tax dollars are being poured into it to make it look like it's working. That's the scam. They're being supported by tax dollars because they're not self-sufficient. Let me catch up here. Puck says, I read somewhere the elections of October surprise would be a collapse of the electric grid. That's a possibility. But I wanted to get back to that. Again, I was showing these on Friday. I was starting to show it, and I got kicked out. I got kicked out at the 37-minute mark and was not able to reconnect. I was not able to reconnect. I was also talking about Dr. Spock because it had come up in conversation, and I had shared that specifically for Jane because Jane was asking about it. Lucky says, how will solar power work with the chemtrails? Yeah, exactly. And where are my solar powered jets? How come I can't fly damn near the speed of sound in a passenger jet on solar power? Because it doesn't work. And Semper says solar is only good for supplementing power. Here in New York, you used to get paid for selling your solar power to the electric companies. Not anymore. There are solar farms going up annually near me. And Puck says, you're correct about solar power. Government is subsidizing something that has no demand. Just like with recycling. And I've made that argument before too. And I used, again, the government's own website, web data to talk about recycling, specifically plastic, because the majority of plastic cannot be redeemed. It's non-recyclable. And the recycling facilities basically shred more than 95% of it and send it to the landfill anyways, because you can't reclaim it. It's no good. And the government has been lying to us for 50 years about that, while they sink billions of dollars into recycling programs, and that tax subsidy is the only thing keeping it going. It's a lie. It's a huge lie. Nature Nerd says problem with solar are predatory loans and 10 plus year monthly payment plans. Then whoever buys the house is stuck paying the loan next, and sometimes the solar companies go out of business. Same problem with a lot of the EV vehicles for utility, like electric vehicle companies that make school buses and transit buses and electric snow plows and other BS things that don't frickin' work. And was it at least every couple of weeks we've been looking at an article where another school district has had to shelve buses and put diesel back on the routes. Again, New York, last year they had to shelve their electric snow plows because they weren't functional. They couldn't work. And these companies often, again, they're operating on subsidies from the US government, taking in most of their income from tax dollars. And then they can't even maintenance the vehicles. And the maintenance cost on those types of, especially transit vehicles, electric transit vehicles, are insane. They cost a fortune to maintenance. And Mr. Gas, he says I have solar, highest power bill so far this year was $55. $55, I guess they mean. And Brian says, imagine a solar jet just stopping thousands of feet in the air in the middle of the ocean. Yeah, okay. There you go. It can't work. It can't work. Where's the solar-powered battleship? Hey, a solar-powered cruise ship. It just can't. It's not realistic. It's just not realistic. Let me see here. Something that's going to be coming up at the DMC, I'm sure. Something that'll be coming up at the DNC, talking about Harris, and this is a Fox Business article. It says Vice President Harris's economic agenda to focus on grocery costs and child tax credits. And I take issue with this, and I'm going to explain why. It says Vice President Kamala Harris is set to roll out key components of her economic agenda at the Democratic presidential nominee presidential nominee in a speech in North Carolina Friday. So this has already happened, which is expected to emphasize plans to lower the prices of groceries, housing, and healthcare, her advisors tell Reuters. Harris's speech is expected to tout plans to lower costs and combat alleged price gouging by companies with possible price controls in an effort to show her campaign's effort to address voters' concerns about high prices ahead of the election. So rather than laying off of the taxes that are causing the inflation, they're going to set limits on what grocery stores can charge for certain items. Because Lord knows that's worked so well in the past. American households have faced considerable pressure on their budgets in recent years, with inflation surging to a 40-year high of 9.1%, blah, blah, blah. Harris's economic agenda speech is her first major policy announcement since President Biden dropped out of the presidential race. She has previewed some elements of her economic policy plan in speeches, although as of Thursday afternoon, her campaign website has no proposals. Under her proposal, the Federal Trade Commission would be allowed to investigate abuses and impose penalties on the food and grocery industry, and her administration would put more scrutiny on merger activity. She wants to put caps on prescription drugs, and she wants to add more money to the child tax credit, which the child tax credit is fraudulent anyways, because the child tax credit is not actually a tax credit. We've talked about it before. The tax credit is actually a reimbursement from the earned income credit that is allocated through the IRS. The IRS determines your eligibility, and earned income credit, which is a huge money pit for tax dollars, pays out to people, mostly for terms of a child tax credit. So people who have earned little or no income or are already collecting welfare for a living get, if they have children, up to a certain number of children. And if they have too many children, they trade them. Trust me, I've seen it done. They trade off kids because nobody follows up to see who has what. If the social security number provided for a child is for a child that's actually in that household, there's no way to determine it. You get a certain amount of money for that. So you want to boost that, which means that more tax money is going to go get dumped into EIC, which again is a massive money pit. Putting caps on what can be charged for groceries, caps on what can be charged for childcare, and investing more government funds into childcare, caps on what can be spent or what can be charged for prescriptions. That's all very communist. And you've seen what it's done in communist and socialist countries. And it's not even her plan. It's her father's, if I'm not mistaken. Didn't her father implement something like that in the early 1970s in Jamaica? And what did it do to Jamaica? Those are the same policies that have run down Venezuela to where they are right now. Semper Fi says, not to mention all these EVs weigh a ton more than gas vehicles, causing unnecessary stress on the roads. No kidding. As I catch up a couple more comments here really quick. Tuck says, more scrutiny on merger activities is code for y'all better donate. Yeah. Monkey said capping prices will make things worse, not help. That's been the history. And Puck says people who don't pay taxes get the most credits. They pay it too. They just don't realize that they do because they pay taxes every time they purchase something. Unless it's food with a, what do they call it here? A SNAP card? Basically food stamp cards. Basically a food stamp card. If you you don't have to pay the tax on the groceries, but everything else you pay, even with that card, you're paying taxes on. And Monkey says capping prices is literal state capitalism. Exactly. And Semper Fi says her father was a Marxist, good old communist Kamala. And Tuck says Jamaica is so great, a busload of Jamaicans moved permanently to Florida every week. Yeah, and that's kind of the point. This is her father's plan. That was her father's economic plan. It worked really well for Jamaica, didn't it? If I remember this correctly, that was what her father did in Jamaica, right? Somebody can tell me in the comments if they know better than I do. And again, that's the same system that was implemented in Venezuela. But everywhere that you look, that this has been done, it's all communist and socialist countries, and it destroyed their economy. It destroyed their economy. Nature Nerd says price control wreck a country's economy, and if a company cannot make a profit off something, they won't sell it because the price, causing the price to skyrocket, it's rare and everyone suffers. And Puck says they wouldn't mind paying taxes with free money. Yeah, they don't realize how trapped in that system they are. And also the child care. I'm getting sick. Oh, we need to provide child care. The government already gives away free child care. Okay? It's called Head Start. And Head Start is your step one of indoctrination. You want your kid to be an animal, put them in Head Start. I promise you, Head Start is a disaster. It's a freaking zoo. Head Start is a zoo. Animals get treated better at the zoo than your children in Head Start. So they already have it. And anybody who's receiving benefits of any kind can already get free health care. The government will pay for it. I forget the name of the program. Remember, I used to be the director of a daycare in Kansas many, many years ago. And almost everybody there, God, one or two parents actually paid. And everybody else got credit. The government was paying for it through the welfare office. And you used to have to do it through the phone. You dialed up the phone, and they wanted to know the access number. It was all done through computers. You didn't talk to anybody. It says you enter your daycare's access number, and you put that in. And then they would want to do, are you collecting? Yes. Dial 1 for yes, whatever. Are you, please enter the access number of the parent or guardian, and you put that number in, and then you could transfer your claim, and that's, you collected your money that way. If just remembering it off the top of my head, there's a procedure, but you did it on the phone, basically. Tuck says they've met single mothers who even got a monthly fuel allowance or a gas card. Correct. They get a clothing allowance because they're supposed to be using that money to buy clothing to go out on job interviews, assuming they don't have decent clothing. And Puck is betting illegal immigrants might qualify for that tax credit. Yeah, because again, it's not tax credit, it's earned income credit. And you qualify for it through the IRS, but the IRS doesn't actually technically handle it. Nature says America is good because I can go to a neighboring store and get something for half the price than the other, but the price control would make all prices the same, hyper-inflating prices. And Nature Nerd says daycare sounds like a nursing home with all those codes. Yeah, pretty much. It's the same concept. And Fluke Man says, if I'm not mistaken, ex-Soviet nations became extremely racist as they have more freedom to express their true feelings, especially the younger generations. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. Wanted to hit on this again because I kicked the hell out of it. And it is a distraction. It is a distraction. And this is Sports Kita talking about the B girls and making more excuses for the nepotism of Rachel Gunn, aka Ray Gunn, the so-called breakdancer at the Olympics, who apparently got her position on that team through nepotism because her husband was one of the judges at qualification. So she should never even have been allowed in the Olympics in the first place. Now, another excuse being made by Australia on her behalf. And I know we beat this to death, but I just wanted to throw it out there. According to them, quote, there wasn't enough B girls to fill the top 16 slot for Olympic selection area. So what they're literally saying that is in a country of, am I correct, 27 million people? In a country of 27 million people, they couldn't find 16 people who could break dance. That's literally what they're saying now. Are you shitting me? Semperfi says, Snope says true. Donald Harris was a post-Keynesian and Marxist economist focused on equality and how the growth rate of an economy is fundamentally different on the class structure of society. So yeah, she's copying her father's format because Lord knows it worked so freaking well, right? Right, Semperfi? It worked out so great for Jamaica and for Venezuela and for every other country that has tried regulating drugs and food and everything else. H12 said, sent my son to a Jewish daycare, and when our Methodist pastor asked him to say grace at Thanksgiving, he sang a Jewish prayer in Yiddish. Did he? Oh my God. And Fluke Man said perhaps there should be law. Children doesn't have jobs, shouldn't pay tax because they're not making money. No, well, the thing is, again, and I've talked about this in detail before because I've seen it in action. I've seen it in action. And they hustle this way because they don't want to work. This is a hustle. You work up to a certain amount while collecting benefits, because you can work and collect food stamps, for example, or SSI, or Medicaid or Medicare, whatever. It's easy to mix them up. You can work up to a certain amount without getting any cash benefits, get all of your federal taxes back at the end of the year, qualify for earned income credit for yourself and for your children because you're under the income bracket. And there's a median of how many kids you can claim versus how much you worked. Okay. There's a science to it. Okay. There's a science to it. And I don't remember exactly, and it changes the amount. Let's say it's $10,000. You earned $10,000 and you have 4 kids, and you just hit that perfect sweet spot where you'll get all of your federal money back and qualify for $6,800 in earned income credit. Okay. So you're going to get like an $8,000 check from the government, courtesy of the taxpayers, because it's not really a refund. All right. It's not really a refund. If you had 5 kids instead of 4, then it starts to drop off because you can only claim so many kids. And again, I'm just throwing numbers out because I don't remember how many kids versus how much income, whatever. So what you do is you got a neighbor with 3 kids, and for a percentage of what they're going to claim on earned income for that 4th child, you let that neighbor use your kid's social security number, child number 4, claiming that they lived in that household for 6 months or more, which nobody can prove if they did or not. Nobody can prove it. How can you prove it if you're the IRS and you're going to spend $100,000 on investigations to see if this person scammed you out of $1,500? And not even you, because it's not the IRS's money, it's the earned income credits money. So someone from EIC would have to do this investigation, not the IRS, just for perspective, okay? So now they get theirs balanced up better because they borrowed this kid. And that's a hustle that many households that are below the poverty line are conducting, ripping off earned income credit, ripping off or hustling the federal government out of their federal money, because they get all that federal money back. I believe they get all the Social Security money back too that they paid into on whatever amount they did work up to a certain point. And you're paying for it just so that they don't have to work, because they don't want to. They don't want to. That way they can only work and earn a few hours a week and earn $8,000 or $10,000 a year, collect welfare benefits, qualify for free health care, qualify for free child care, because you're paying for that too, collect a big fat so-called refund check at the end of the year, and go blow it at the casino or some bullshit. Raccoon says they work with a girl who has 5 kids, lived with the father of all, but doesn't marry him because she'll lose the money, her monthly checks. Meanwhile, she's driving a new SUV and bought a $350,000 home. I don't get it. Now you get it. And Puck says there'll never be the necessary austerity measures implemented here to fix this. Look what happened in Greece when they tried. Or austerity, rather. I mispronounced that. But that's how that grift works. That's how it works. Or just as a basic idea, like I said, I don't have exact numbers in front of me, but that's basically how that works. And there are people that are perfectly comfortable to sit there. I only have to work 15 hours a week, and I get right in that sweet spot, and I get free child care. I get free medical care. I get food stamps. I can go to food pantries. There's other programs that I can collect. I get a fat EIC check at the end of the year, take a vacation, go to the casino. That's how it works. And there's nobody putting their foot down on that. Nobody. And it's billions. How much? I'm gonna look it up. I'll try to remember and I'll put it up tomorrow. Just how much EIC pays out every year, because I guarantee half of it is bullshit. And Prime Mover says, I think we could all settle our differences with the kitty show and tell time. Oh yeah, I happen to have a cat. I happen to have one. Come here. Come here. Come here, Granny Smith. Come here, Grant. Good girl. Hold on. Here we go. Granny Smith, everybody. There's Granny Smith. She's a good girl. Hi, darling. I'm about to wrap up the show. You want to hang around for a minute? So, since we are at the top of the hour, again, you are listening to and or watching Coffee Talk, and you can join the live portion Monday through Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and on Coffee Talk and Prepper University. You can find me on fistfulofradio.com. You want to get down? You don't like me talking? Okay, I'll put you down. She wants me to be quiet. fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta. You can find me on X at Coffee Talk Chat. So thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today. As always, hope you got something out of the conversation, and we will try to